Interest. If you have to borrow money to buy your equipment on initial cost, or and also if you have to borrow money to operate the farm or the golf course or the baseball field or whatever it happens to be, you're going to have to pay interest on that money. And that price of interest is going to vary year to year, depending on what money costs on a given year. Right now, operating interest is probably somewhere between 8 and 12%, depending on how good of risk you are. And a lot also on interest depends on what your credit worthiness is. The greater risk you are, the higher the interest rate you pay. Now you go down and get new car loans at, gosh, some of them are now advertising 0.9% interest. You know, you can get some really good deals. If they're trying to move some merchandise and get it out of their inventory, one of the ways to do that is not charge you interest. The car company basically becomes the bank on the thing. And they're absorbing a loss by giving you the car at a less interest rate, because they know most people buy a car on a monthly payment. Most people don't come out and plunk down $15,000 for a vehicle. They're concerned on whether it's going to cost them $200 a month payment or $250 a month payment. Well, if you can get that payment down low enough a person thinks he can afford it, then he's going to want to buy that new car. So that interest game is played all the time, and it's always negotiable between you and your banker. And in farming, that will change year to year. Now, you can get loans that have locked-in interest. Many homeowners buy a house on a 30-year fixed mortgage. Many pieces of farm equipment are bought on a 10 or 15 or 20-year fixed mortgage, which means they have a given amount of principal and interest they're going to pay every year, and that interest rate is locked in. Say they borrowed at 8% money in 1987, well, they're paying 8% money in 1998. And they will, if it's a 20-year loan, right out through the year 2007. And at the end of that 20 years, they'll have it all paid off, and they'll own it outright. Now what happens generally at the end of those loan terms is that they fix the loan so that by the time the loan runs out, the equipment's wore out. Then you get to start the cycle all over again, see? So those lending institutions, they got it figured out. They want to keep their hand in your pocket. But it also allows people to operate. It's called leveraging. You can use other people's money to run an operation and be able to stay solvent. That way you don't have to accumulate a huge amount of money to make your initial purchase. You can go out and borrow it, and then you're going to pay interest on that borrowed money. Now, see, that's an opportunity cost that you have to be concerned about, because if you had that money in your pocket, what could it earn you? Well, if you borrowed it for 8%, but if you had it in your pocket, maybe you'd throw it in the stock market, and last year you might have made 40%. So, boy, that doesn't look so good, does it? Of course, 3 years ago you could have been in the stock market and made nothing. So then you look pretty smart going the other way, having borrowed it. So it's all a crystal ball. You never know what's going to happen to the price of money. So most people will do the fixed interest loans, but there are floating loans. You can also borrow on a float so that it is locked in a year at a time, and then every year it's reevaluated, and it floats with whatever the market value of money is. And so that becomes a little more risky, but it also mirrors the economy from year to year to year. Most lenders would not prefer to do that in the agricultural lending business. They would much rather have a fixed loan, and then they look at their long-range planning and plan long-range accordingly, and they'd like to lock them in. But you can get a variable interest loan. That is a possibility. So those things have to be weighed out. at certain times in life, like right now, money's cheap. Inflation's running 1.5%. That effectively sets the loan price, and the interest rates on large borrowing might be around 7%, 6.5%, 6% right now. Depends on the volume that you're dealing with. But you might be able to get that rate on a variable interest loan. But if you have to go to a fixed loan, they say, well, we don't think it's going to stay that way. We're projecting that it's going to average 8%. And so you get a fixed rate loan at 8%, but you get a variable rate loan this year at 6%. But hey, next year they'll reevaluate it, and it'll change. Potentially. Likely, it'll change. Might go down, might go up. Depends on what happens in the money market. And that goes for, lots of people buy houses that way. They will buy, most houses are sold on a fixed rate. A lot of houses are also bought on a variable rate loan. And you're gambling. You're playing Las Vegas on that variable rate.